call this work session of the school district one-day order. First agenda item is discuss the statewide assessment update.
Should have received in your board update earlier in September the overall big picture of the statewide
Make sure the on-off buttons click.
So just wanted to walk you through statewide assessment. For those of you that maybe don't know, or you do know, and it assesses English language arts, math, science, and then we also have a section of that also testing for English language proficiency and data. This data, English language arts are. So just a couple of key points to know is that the remainder of the statewide assessment, one of several measures of certain things. And this year, based on what we have from ODE, the results do show that our stabilizing this is again a tool. It's not a perfect tool for looking at, provides one way to how we utilize federal funding. And it can be a measure of equity and opportunity, especially for students that have been historically underserved. And I also just like to note that results, they're important, but they're also not a complete picture of all the things that our schools do to provide for students and our families. So just kind of keeping that in mind. Just another indicator, Oregon participation rates are up at high school, but again, too low to compare data. For those of you that are real math statistician folks in this room, they're just really, the participation rate at the secondary level, again, is too low to compare the data. Our economically disadvantaged group, which is how the state classifies it, did expand during the pandemic, and that's also a group that you can't do cohort comparisons because during the pandemic, technically 100% of our students were on a economically disadvantaged situation because we utilized free and reduced lunch for all of our students during that time. And again, just as we compare the data, really thinking in an asset frame and an area of growth for our students, not thinking at the data as a deficit model. So just a couple of the key points. This has also been asked of me multiple times as I've been out and about in schools and just checking in with folks. I thought it would be helpful for all of you, just as a reminder, because sometimes years pass, they get a little blurry. So our current third graders in kindergarten, March of 2020 hit for that. Our fourth graders were in first grade during that time. Fifth graders were in second grade. Sixth graders were in third grade. And then you can see their years proceeding afterwards where they were in terms of how the pandemic impacted their learning. So just as a reminder, in March, we stopped school. First grade, if you're looking at third grade, they were in CDL for most of the first grade, so the hybrid model, if they came back at the end. And then second grade was our return to school. So just, again, for a frame of reference for each of those grade levels, I thought that would be helpful. Next slide. Here's our participation data. Federal law does have a target of at least 95% of our students to participate. And our participation data is up, but you can see that we are seeing a higher percentage of students continuing to opt out, especially at the secondary level. We talked about this the last time I shared this data. Pre-pandemic, we had roughly anywhere from 400 to 600 opt-outs over the course of the year. In 21-22, we had around 800 to 900 opt-outs of the various tests. This last year, we had roughly 1,400 opt-outs for all of the assessments, so at various points. So our opt-out data shows a vast majority are 7th, 8th, and 11th graders. And I think students and families are starting to find it more challenging to find sense of meaning in a standardized assessment versus the assessments that they see within their core classes, the assessments that they see in their CTE or college and career pathway courses that they're taking. They see meaning and connection in their class versus standardized assessments that feel like outside of their classroom setting. So I think that's what we're seeing, particularly at the secondary level, as students are developing and having their opinions and having their thoughts around those things. I think we're just going to continue to see a little bit of a challenge, particularly at the secondary level, of students seeing and making that connection of meaning as much as they do within the courses that they take at their high school. So just kind of wanted to talk about that. And then I think it really plays into the importance of the work of our strategic plan and creating that meaning in what we do in our classroom settings. So I think, again, standardized assessment does fit a little outside of that for them. And I think it's a fair thing for them to think about. This is our data in comparison to the state last year. So again, a reminder, our third graders were kindergartners when the pandemic first started, and so on from that other table. What we see in our data is overall very similar across the state. The state saw increases in some areas, decreases in other areas. I think again, I just want to give a reminder, it doesn't take into account all the individual work that we do with students and what we offer for students. It's one measure in time. What we see again at the 11th grade, really that group especially was below 80% in all categories. So it's hard to have comparison data in that grouping. So our scores in ELA, math, and science as compared to the state data. And then if we go to the next slide, I think this is kind of the more helpful slide. It helps us take a look at our data in comparison to last year. I think one thing I always like to remind folks is year to year, when you look at third grade data, that's an apples to oranges comparison, meaning it's a totally different group of students that you are comparing. So if you look at the math section, so for example, math last year, we scored 37.7% students meeting the standard on SBA. This year, we scored 39%. That is an entirely different group of third graders that we tested. So the math scores did go up, and we did see that overall trend occur in math, where we saw, for the most part, an increase in our SBA scores in math. If you look at ELA, you can look at that same group of third graders, and in 21-22, we were at 36.2%. In 22-23, we were at 35.7%. So a slight decrease, but again, a totally different group of third graders. Helpful data that I always used to look at as a principal, as well as how is the cohort of students doing. So that's where I use the diagonal. So what's helpful in that situation is if you look at the third graders in 21-22, they were now fourth graders in 22-23, and what you see for them is they went from 36.2% to 38%. And statistically, an increase of a percentage or two on SBA is challenging and hard to do, and we felt like with our literacy work this last year especially, that would make sense, and we see that occur actually for most of the diagonals until you get to secondary. Which again, secondary, we had a high number of opt-outs in that situation. So whether or not that data is as clean is hard to tell in the cohort data. So again, seeing increases in an apples to oranges comparison in math, and then seeing some increases in cohort comparisons if you look at literacy. Again, and we are not quite back to pre-pandemic levels. If we were to go, that's the 18-19 group. That was the last time we took the assessment pre-pandemic in that way. Fun fact there, those third graders back at 18-19 were at 43.5%. They are currently seventh graders in our system right now, sitting at 43.2%. It's a little year context. The break there is when we didn't do assessment. Last big data set of information here is our each of our student groups. Oops, did not update up at the top, but I do want to call out These are the titles that ODE uses for our student groups. This is not the titles that we have utilized in our strategic plan. We have, for example, the first one we use Native American, Alaska Native. So these are, again, the titles that we are used by ODE and how they pull the data. A reminder, economically disadvantaged is a cohort that's hard to compare because it's not the same group of students. So this shows our 18-19 data, and then it includes also 21-22, 22-23. Again, a different cohort of students every time, but does show our data for the last 2 years, as well as 18-19 pre-pandemic. Very similar to the state and other large surrounding districts. Again, places seeing increases mainly showing up in math from 21-22 to 22-23, and then some slight decreases from 21-22 to 22-23 in literacy. But very similar to what the state trend we're seeing in the districts that are nearby us that I would call the big five that are similar in size to us. I think looking ahead, it still, it confirms our focus area work for this year. Last year, we did a lot of work at the elementary on literacy, and I think you can see in the apples to apples comparison of data that did pay off. I think it continues just to stay focused on our core work, which would be especially around math and literacy in general, to continue that work. Last year, we did a lot of work around interventions for literacy. Now it's also getting back to making sure we're teaching the core standards in especially math and literacy, but we are focused on language social studies and science at the high school and, or the secondary level. I think, and then just really having that targeted support for our identified focal groups as part of our strategic plan is huge in that in that work that we're going to be doing. We are still continuing our work around language scaffolds and supports K-12. We saw some need for that, especially for our students that are language learners. We are really working hard this year for student engagement and connection. I think as we move farther and farther away from the pandemic, just making sure we are doing things to engage students in our learning, have them feel that belonging at school, just wanting to come to school, all of those pieces we're trying to do that we did pre-pandemic, and as we are again moving out of it, doing those same pieces. We are focused on getting our early literacy grant that will be focused on K-3, that will also provide some additional supports and trainings for our staff. I think we talked about it in our August retreat around letters training and what that can do for our staff. It's really helpful in helping them support the foundational literacy skills of students. And just again, continuing our work around social emotional learning, which is about that, again, that feeling that they feel safe and welcome in school and that they belong in our schools, and working through those pieces. So I think, again, just that importance of building connections for our students to feel that they can be successful. And I think we're going to continue to face challenges of opting out. And I think that does throw our data off. We were unable to, the 1400, there's not a way to, well, it's a very in-depth tech process to analyze exactly who opted out and what opted out, but I did pull about 20 names randomly just to see who was opting out in that general look. And what we see are students, I would say students that are, they are getting a 3.0 or above is a chunk of them. And then students that are experiencing disabilities are another chunk that tend to be opting out. So it's an interesting sample that came through in that. I think if we have time, hopefully when our tech person comes back to be able to analyze it, I am a little bit more curious as to who else is opting out of those assessments. That is all. Questions? I should have put a question slide. I'm sorry.
I think this group knows that questions are always there.
Yeah.
Looks like we start with Patrick.
Yeah, good evening, friends. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that presentation. I'd seen the data and it was good to have it broken down a little bit more. This is a very big question, and so you can, email me later with your thoughts, educational philosophy wise, but it's something I've thought of over the years and never really asked directly. And that's when we see some of these secondary standards in math, for instance, where we're showing 80% not meeting the standard. I understand standards are designed based on what experts believe is necessary for college and career readiness, but is there a value or reasonableness to creating standards that 80% of students do not meet? Because, we can talk about opting out, and we can talk about being ambitious, but at some level it feels sort of almost farcical to have standards that, even if we made wonderful substantial progress and saw 5%, 10% increase, we'd still have 70% of students not meeting the standard. So I just wonder, as a matter of educational philosophy, is it useful to have standards that are defined in such a way?
I think, Patrick, that is a very large question. Yes, agreed. I think, and I don't know, maybe our school board reps can chime in on this. I think the challenge, particularly at those grades, is the connection with standardized testing and putting forth their best effort on smarter balanced assessment versus what we see in their core assessments within the classroom environment, if that makes sense. So I think I always wrestle with that number because I will acknowledge students that there are students that are not proficient in math, let's say the ones that you pointed out there. But I also know that connection, I think students need to find meaning in what they're doing and a real world connection. And sometimes I think the standardized test does not always provide that for all of our students. And so I think that while that shows 80% of our students are not proficient, I don't think that's necessarily an accurate number for our students that are in high school that are not proficient in math is probably what I would say to that. And I don't know if the students reps have anything that they would share around their experience with smarter balance assessment.
Yeah, I have a few questions.
Okay, I love it.
Well, and also some comments. So I took the test last year, and from my experience, because I saw the people who were taking the test and people who opted out, and the main people who don't take the test are people who are either think they're the highest and brightest in the school and are too good to take the test because they know they're gonna get a flawless score, or it's not worth their time. Or the people who are in the lower they get lower test scores usually within whenever they take a class or whenever they take these standardized tests, and they just don't want to. If they take it, they don't want to fail and know they failed. They take the test. That's just my experience of seeing who takes the test. For the majority of people in the middle who fall in the range of A to C students, most of them take the test. And one of my questions is, well, I think the main question is, what's the exact goal for especially the juniors? Boost their grade up, boost their score, I'm sorry. Because that fall from COVID was, when I first looked at the graph, it was kind of shocking to see that before.
Say that question again.
What exactly is the goal that we're gonna put towards the juniors?
For their state assessment?
Yeah.
We would love to see like an increase of at least 2 to 3% every year. But like Patrick was saying, I think there's, when you're looking at where we're at, is that going to be enough? I think what we also are focused on though too, again, I think it's a reminder that ESPA is one piece of your educational career in high school. It's not the only piece that defines your success. We have had students that are really strong in their core classes and electives and those sorts of things go on to college and did not pass ESPA. So I think what's hard is it's only one measure. And so what we're looking at is overall looking at high school in particular, just really focused on making sure students are on track for graduation, making sure they're getting the credits they need, making sure they're seeing careers that they're interested in as our primary. And then also, again, making sure we're teaching grade level standards so that that when they do take ESPA, that they can be successful. I think we're always in the push-pull of whether or not students see ESPA as something they need to put forth their best effort versus like if you're in your language arts class and you're writing a paper on some novel that you're really connected to, you tend to probably put more effort into something like that versus maybe that's not necessarily ESPA. So we're trying to find that balance and supporting students with it, but also still supporting what's going on in your high school core classes. It's a great question.
It's just, when I first heard about the TESFAC, my junior year, the first thing that people said was, oh, it's not mandatory, so they don't really need to do it. And also, again, they don't need to try because if they fail, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's a little bit that's out there, and I think that's hard for us to combat, right? Like it's and you know, I think again, we try to solicit meaning in it and encourage everybody to do their best on it. But I know some students think that, and my own child begged me to opt out of it, and I still made her take it. So.
And my final comment,
Okay.
Before anybody else has questions, is that I took the test last year, along with, and I usually tend to stay with, I like to think the smarter crowd. When I took that test, I did not understand both. I took the science test first, I think. I did not understand anything. And I got A's on all my science classes. So I don't, maybe that the percentage is a little, like you said, not that accurate. Because maybe the SBAC has questions that they don't ask in the curriculum. Or if they do, it's very tiny amount when they do it in class. But are we gonna emphasize stuff that's on the SBAC?
The SBAC is built off of standards, but like, for example, if you're talking about for science, it's built over your science standards from 9th, 10th, and 11th grade year. So it's a collection of your standards. So I think that's also another piece of it too, is that it can actually go back, all the way to what you took your freshman year. And so sometimes that's not, when you're looking at it, maybe it's not quite as fresh as it was your freshman year.
Thank you.
I have two questions, both within correlation to what RJ said. And my first one was, how do you guys plan on the students that refer to the SBAC as not mandatory and just putting that sort of status around the entire SBAC? How do you plan to encourage those students into taking that on?
That's a great question. I think part of it is, for those of you that know, we have a very clear policy and law that indicates we have to inform families that they have the right to opt out. So it's a very clear, like, we have to share it with them, and families, in that sense, it's not mandatory if a family chooses to opt out of it, and any family can choose to opt their children out of SBAC testing. So and that's allowed. So we would not try to mandate that they take the test. So I think that information is out there. It's very clear. I think it's shared amongst families. It's shared amongst schools that, hey, it's opt-out time, and I think that occurs. We try to, again, instill the importance of taking it as a data set in time to help us analyze how our schools are doing overall as a big picture. And it doesn't necessarily, it helps us with big picture look. It doesn't necessarily drill down to exactly what you Hadley need to be successful in science. That's what, the teacher assessments and the summative informative assessments that happen in your class will give you, your teacher, to support you. It gives us an overall look of how students are doing in general. So I think that's why I was sharing. It's not a complete picture of the success of a student, and I would not want any student to think that test defines them, because there's a million pieces of the pie that define them in their school environment. So so it's hard. It's a hard balance to find.
And then, thank you. My second question was, again, in correlation with what RJ said, is the curriculum we've been taught in freshman, sophomore, and junior year. I also agree with what he said, how it didn't have any borders with he's learned. I've read that many other students have taken it. So how do you plan on assisting those students who are taking it on being ready for preparing?
I think that's where we really need to get back to, in your core classes, being really clear on the learning targets and the purpose of what you're learning and what it's connected to standard-wise. And that's something that we have been working on in terms of core instruction, which is one of our areas of focus, and just really getting, I think coming out of the pandemic, sometimes there was a mentality that students were behind, but we're really trying to accelerate your learning. And part of that is not to also teach you, like if you're a junior, we don't want to teach you ninth grade standards. We still want to teach you the standards that you need to know as a junior and scaffold you into what you need to be successful in those standards. So I think that's what we're really trying to do. It was hard coming out of the pandemic because we felt just the angst of coming out of it. And I really feel like as this last year and with the start of the school year, we're really getting back to focusing on the standards that we need to be teaching in those classes and making sure that we're assessing for that and making sure students understand, like, I am learning about linear equations today and their correlation to the real world and how that would show up in an assessment in my class that may also show up on a standardized assessment in that class.
Thank you.
You guys asked a real hard-hitting question, just so you know.
We just share in your dialogue that you just had. And, I think that's part of the discussion around standardized testing for ACT and SAT too, and what you were just sharing around, a piece of it's a snapshot of the marker of learning and how there's so much that occurs in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. And that's part, I think, of that debate or thought around what is that marker of time when you take that SAT or ACT. So it's one that standardized testing notion also plays out in so many different areas like post-secondary as well.
I'm just thinking about that. I think it's a struggle to what is the value for the student to do this work, and parents as well. They're like seeing if they're going to put them in the test. So how do we build value around this? And it's helping us in some way, it's a component for us to measure, but they're the ones that have to do it. So how do we create value for them?
And again, I think as we've come out of the pandemic, we're getting our participation rates to stabilize. How do we, how do our teachers communicate about it? How do we make connection and meaning to it around what they're learning and the standards that they're learning in class? I think, I still think we'll face challenges with students just having feelings about it in general. I think exactly what Brooke is saying. We see it with ACT and SAT. There's just like, students want to feel connection and meaning to what they're doing. And I know the real life application is so important for them in what they're doing in classrooms. And so sometimes it's gonna, I think we can try to convince, but I think some will still just feel like what they see in their classroom might be more valuable than and it's hard to tease that out.
I guess my follow-up to that, I guess, is like, so we use it just like as another data collection. We also have all of the scientific assessment that we're measuring. So is it more for like the state that they're collecting that we're doing this pass-through?
I think it's a combination of, it gives us an overall picture, it gives the state an overall picture of how our district is doing, but it's also, we also look at other things, like for high school, it's on-track data, and it's our graduation rates, who's graduating, who's not. There's just so many. And I think that's why it's just really hard. It's such an incomplete picture of what our schools do. And then if you layer on top of that, the needs of mental health and everything else that we're also supporting in that pie. I'm really just going into this pie analogy here. But just really all of the pieces that we're doing to support students that don't show up in this necessarily. Yeah.
What other tests are the students taking during the year when this comes up? So how many assessments are they taking?
The spring is a little hopping for them. So if you're theoretically, if you're a language learner, you may be taking we may have a round of PACT or PSATs, or if they're juniors, they're taking their SATs and ACTs. They're taking IB testing. If they're at Hill High, they're taking AP testing potentially if you're at the other three schools. They are also taking, you know, if they're a language learner, they're taking Alpha in the spring. And then on top of that, whatever assessments. Now, to be fair, our teachers know that this is all happening, so they're very cognizant of that. But they're also doing whatever summative assessments that are tied to the curriculum that are happening. So they're also still having their work in class. So it's
I'm sure that contributes to the
Yeah.
lack of participation.
And I think we try to time it. If I remember correctly, I'm going to have the dates wrong. I know AP testing is usually the first 2 weeks of May. IB testing is the latter half of May. And we try to time ESPA if we can somewhere in between there so that we can also maximize the amount of time that students have to learn. So we don't try to stack them on top of each other, but we know it's like kind of a long window of time first if you're a junior.
I think that this conversation is a reminder that there are some things under the sun that do not change. We have been having this conversation at various districts, at various states. I've lived in 5, 6, 7 different states, and I believe my parents have had the same conversation in every one of those places on our behalf, the same thing. And the students at that time were saying the very same thing. Interesting, because what you are saying to us is you're observing and you're experiencing that these two don't align. Let's go back to apples and oranges in the pie, or let's go into apples and peaches in the pie, however you want to put it together. But they're not quite going together the way we think we should. And so you do have more people who are opting out for the very reason. If you just look at the month of May, there's a good reason, especially if you're in IB in one school or you're in AP in another school. I think what I really wanted to say was, please don't feel like this is an uncomfortable conversation, because it isn't. Because this is the conversation that we have every year. It doesn't matter what school district, it doesn't matter what state, this is the same conversation. Because one day we pray that our education system will change to meet the authentic needs of the students. Right now, we're still working on historical facts. It's not really representing what you guys need. What we're doing is what we're commanded to do, legislatively mandated to do, none of which has anything to do with what you need right now. All of that is historical fact. So if you're not comfortable with it, you shouldn't be. If you're not happy with it, you shouldn't be. Because as a parent, I'm not either. That's why I'm here. But can I take on the state and change it right now? No. But I know a lot more about it. So I'm just empowering you to understand that it's okay for you to be uncomfortable with this, because this is not comfortable and it doesn't make sense. And quite frankly, like Audrey said, this is a snapshot in time that is often misconstrued multiple times over as they begin to compare the wrong grades with the right, like if she hadn't put that up there so that you knew that you were comparing one grade to another grade at another time, and people misconstrue that all the time. So hats off to you. I'm glad you recognize that. I'm glad you wrestled with it. So the fight is not over yet. So I hope that when you get to be our age and you have children, that you're still fighting and you're going to remember this conversation. So please don't forget.
Building off of Nancy's point, there is a group of school board members around the state, and I'm sure there'll be a session. I attended a session at the last OSBA conference last November, where board members were adamant, we can't not do it. Legally, we have to do it. But there are a small group of board members who feel like these tests are not an accurate reflection of how the students are doing, and they are actively encouraging their parents to opt out. What's that?
We do see that.
Yeah, there are school districts where from the board level on down, they're actively encouraging people to opt out because they don't feel like this is an accurate reflection of how their students are doing. I don't know that I want to go that way. I feel like you look, but so if we believe that this is not a super accurate reflection of how our kids are doing, what do we tend to use to feel like we have a handle on how our kids are doing?
And I think that goes, I don't know if I would say it's super inaccurate. Again, snapshot in time is probably in a piece of the pie. It's
Oh,
probably,
and from that perspective, it feels like the pandemic is still the star of the show. There's a snapshot in time, like.
It definitely had its impact, but I think that is why, as we've talked about with like even our strategic plan and how we're utilizing things like at the elementary level, we utilize running records, which is an assessment that we give. I think we talked about that a little bit, and I'd happily demonstrate a running record on any one of you if you'd like to do it one day. But it really is an assessment that the teacher gives or a support person in the classroom gives us one-on-one connecting with the student. And so it's not this like environment that's like this, you're looking at a test, it's like, okay, read this passage that's connected to what we've been doing in class and makes sense. And it's not something that's odd, that's out of the norm. You know, if it's about penguins, it's because we studied about penguins the week before, so we know some background knowledge, and then I read it so I can have some context behind it, and then that really shows how I am as a reader. So that is the piece that we have been using, especially around literacy. We use something called a STAR assessment as well in elementary school, which is it's still a slightly standardized assessment that's on the computer, but I think it just creates more meaning and there's more context as it's connected to our curriculum, if that makes sense. At the secondary level, we've been really just, honestly focusing on teaching grade level standards and looking at core grades in our core classes to just see how students are performing. So if you're talking on track, that's our system. We're looking like, are you on track? Are you successful in your class? And is it, are you passing with an A, B, or C? And looking to see who's not passing with those scores and how are we supporting them. I think this gives an overall picture. We have groups, and I don't want to discount that, like on slide 8, we have groups that are not performing as well as other groups in our district. And we have an obligation, which is why in our strategic plan, we have focal groups that we know we need to really specifically target. So this helps us know that and affirm that is the groups those are groups that we need to be supporting. And it's also looking at the data within that high school and within that middle school, who is unsuccessful and who do we need to support in a different way, or what are our practices that we need to change to be more supportive of all students in our classroom. So again, using some of our assessments that we have, but also looking at our grading practices, making sure we're teaching learning targets that are on standard. All of those pieces are things that we're doing and watching for as we're out in school.
And I feel like maybe pandemic reset every expectation. And having been here for a little bit, on the board for a little bit before that, and my kids in school for a little bit before that, I think I speak for myself, I got used to the idea of, based on our demographic information, language learners, free and reduced lunch, we had outperformed what you would expect to see from a district with our demographics, pretty easy to handle it statewide. And I think that's because we never kid by name, strength, need. I can't remember the new one yet. Sorry.
No, value and empower.
There you go.
We're still knowing them by name, strength, and
Sure.
need, and we're just
Yeah, yeah.
empowering and valuing.
And so we have the kids in our classrooms and the teachers are able to connect them. We were able to overcome some of those, what has traditionally been adverse learning environments or whatever. So I think as we get kids back, I think we'll get back to that, but I think we kind of got used to outperforming what our demographics say we should have.
And we do, and that is a feather in our cap, but we also know we still have work to do, and we're still going, that is the whole point of a strategic plan and why we're doing the work we're doing, because we also know we can do better. So that part is, and I know our schools feel good about it. Even today during our PK-12, we are looking at data and analyzing and trying to determine based on some of our current data that we have at our fingertips right now to see what are things that we're doing, what are steps that we're making to support students that are right in your classroom and have their little butts in their chairs right now. So
I think, final thought is that one of the things that as students you may be observing is the truth that COVID didn't just impact you as a student. COVID was a trauma experienced by all levels of our society, which means that there was trauma experienced by your parents because of what was happening to you and because of what was happening in their jobs. And so what you have are parents who are going like this and going, I have to protect. I have to make sure I stand up and make sure I protect my child, because I don't want them feeling bad because they can't do this, because they just spent 2 years pulling their hair out. I was pulling my hair. Do you see what I'm saying? So there, some of this and some of this quote unquote opt out is because of parents saying, I'm protecting my child. I don't want to put additional stress if I don't see the importance, for lack of better terms. And so don't forget that you as a student are not the only ones who are traumatized and negatively impacted by what we as a society just went through. Parents were impacted, but nobody talks about that. But they're starting to articulate and to demonstrate how that is being borne out. So just don't forget, that's just another thought. I appreciate this conversation, I really do, because this was important.
Any other questions or comments regarding the assessment data? Okay, Roger. Forward to future updates. We're gonna call an audible. We have all of the members of the bond committee here, ready to go. So we're gonna switch the order of our next two items, and we're gonna skip to item B in our agenda, the bond oversight committee final report, it says in our agenda.
I feel like we should be all clapping for Audrey.
Yeah.
Audrey.
Make sure.
All adjustment.
One of our owls isn't working, and so I'm gonna move this closer to the middle.
All right.
And so people will need to make sure they speak up.
Just a reminder, project all road says your louder sign, but be sure to project so that everybody at home can hear you and the recording can hear you okay.
And the biggest thing is that even though it's really hard, if Erica asks you a question, try not to turn and talk to Erica, talk to the
Oh, I like to make eye contact, Jordan.
I know.
And this bad, I like to look at people. I can't help it. I can't help it.
Watch the owl, watch the owl.
Talk to the owl.
Talk to the owl.
Talk to the owl.
Talk to the owl.
The one way over here, not the one right in front of you. All right, ready? We are ready, yeah.
All right. Matt and I are happy to be here tonight representing the Citizen Bond Oversight Committee. We actually have a couple other members with us. We have Maureen.
Green Barnhart.
Sonia.
Ackman.
Patrick. And we're here. We may have a couple more joining us.
All right.
But before we begin, I'd like to take a few moments to share some thoughts, because this may be the last time I get to come talk to you guys. So, the 2017 bond and all school bonds are a team sport. In our case, this team includes not just our district team and the Citizen Bond Oversight Committee. It also includes all of the school board members who worked on this bond, all of the folks who worked on the 2017 bond campaign, all of the members of the bond planning team that helped craft the $408 million bond that was presented to the school board back in 2017, and all of the members of the long range planning committee, really fast, that met for years prior to the 2017 bond to identify our district needs. It also includes all the staff and community members who work to develop the trust the community needs to make this huge investment by making our past bond issues successful. And finally, this team includes all of the community members who came together to pass our 2017 bond by more than 66%. And of course, the taxpayers who continue to pay those property tax bills. Together, this team helped develop a bond promise to our community. And I hope you'll agree that together we've made quite a team and been able to exceed our bond promise. While it's been a big effort by a lot of people, I do want to take a minute
to recognize a few individuals who have dedicated the past few years to making this program a success. Sharon McCarty is, I think her title is bond specialist, but she's been so much more than that. We could not have done this without Sharon. Jane Subenza, right here. Marketing specialist, has been responsible for our website, planning all of the events, putting together these kind of presentations to help me look good. So thank you, Jane. Jim Peterson, who was Dave Peterson before Dave Peterson, knows our buildings better than anybody but maybe Dave, and helped us put together the right pieces of equipment to go in all of our buildings. And finally, Grant Corliss. You all know Grant is a former principal coach, but he has been our liaison between the work we're doing and our buildings. And bringing Grant on was one of the smartest things we did. So thank you to all of those guys. One last word of thanks to all the building administrators, staff, parents, and especially the students who we've disrupted over the past few years. Your patience has been so appreciated, and we hope it's all been worth it. So, without further ado, here's the final Citizen Bond Oversight Committee report. A special thanks to this dedicated group for their 5+ years of service, acting as the eyes and ears of our community and ensuring that we keep our bond promise to the community. So, we'll jump right in. So the bond promise, this was the package that we put together back in 2017. Okay. When Hillsboro School District Board voted to place this on the ballot, it made a promise to our community, and that promise included that we would prioritize safety and security, that we would add security cameras, enhance emergency communications, and upgrade security measures that would keep our students, staff, and school visitors safe. Number 2, we promised to renovate and repair our aging schools. And that we would replace the 15 worst portable classrooms in history, and that we would do significant upgrades at 2 of our oldest buildings, Greenville and Ohio. We would relieve growth, crowded classrooms and plan for growth by constructing 2 additional elementary and 1 replacement elementary school. We would expand 2 existing middle schools, high schools. We'll probably expect for it, and we would build the ground. That we would provide a modern education for every student, and that we would update our school to provide technology, labs, spaces for hands-on learning, and that these modern spaces would expand access to up-to-date job training opportunities in partnership with PCC and local employers, giving students a head start on career. And finally, that we would make wise use of the dollars that we would get. We promised that we would renew the current tax rate, $2.24 at the time we passed the bond, and that we wouldn't increase that rate. And that this bond issue would be part of a long-term plan to maintain and improve our school facilities. And that we would provide an independent oversight committee, and that at least 90% of the money that was raised would be spent on construction and repair projects, not overhead. So how do we do? Here's the latest bond financial summary. We passed the bond for $408 million between the bond premium we received, the state grant money that we received, and bond interest. We actually ended up a little over $514 million to spend. To date, we've spent $501 million of that, and we've committed an additional $10.8 million. that those additional commitments are primarily around technology, replacement cycles. We've got a little bit of money in there to purchase additional property if we will do. But we've got about just under $2 million uncommitted at this point. One of the things that the IRS says is you can't pass those bonds and then hang on to it just for the other stuff. You have to spend 85% of those bond proceeds and the interest that comes with it within the first 36 months, that we met that threshold. And finally, we did receive just over $79 million in bond premium at the time we sold those bonds. That allowed us to do a lot of additional work and basically say yes when we might otherwise have had to say no. And there's a pretty graph that James put together showing how we spent. Bond category. So let's look at what we actually did. Prioritizing safety and security. As of September 27th, we had spent just under $80 million on this part of the bond. We provided secure entry vestibules at all of our buildings, meaning that people can no longer just walk into a building. They have to, they're directed through the main office. We put security cameras and access control in every building. We put door alarms and monitoring systems in every building. We put miles and miles of fencing to help secure our campuses. We put in emergency alarms and visual warning systems. Those buttons that you see there on the bottom right allow us to basically put a building into lockdown or lockout with the push of the button. We upgraded playgrounds. We had a total of 9 new ADA compliant playgrounds at our elementary schools. We also built 3 new pre-K playgrounds with the rubber tile. We've got more to do, so the next time you're looking at one, we've got more of those to do that we were able to replace 9 of those. We did a lot of improvements in parking lots throughout the district to separate parents, buses, pedestrians, to make our campuses more safe. We did with a special thing to Matt. We upgraded all of our buildings seismically. We put in cameras and GPS on all of our school buses. We installed distributed antenna systems at all of our buildings to ensure that our first responder radios work in our buildings. And there in italics, you'll notice, we'll see this throughout. We put in some added scope. This is things that we had hoped to be able to do when we passed the bond, if we had the additional dollars. And because we had those additional dollars, we were able to upgrade all of our the 8 new gyms that we built with the elementary school to replace our old gym and cafeteria. We built those to the immediate occupancy seismic standards. So those will be available for district or for community shelters in the event of an natural disaster. We spent just under $150 million on renovating and repairing our aging school. Some examples of those things. We did a big remodeling project at Hill High. I'm really proud of this one. That campus is really transformed. I mean, it's a new place and beautiful. We remodeled Reed Hill. This was our very first summer. This was a big job, bigger than we were expecting it to be. So But it's a beautiful, it's a cool, I think we retain the charm of the old building, but it's got all of the bells and whistles in the classrooms. We got rid of the cafeteria that used to be in the basement. We added some classrooms to replace all those old, portable buildings that they used to have. A new playground, again, it's a transformed campus in conjunction with the work that the city has been doing, or the county has been doing on the road around. It really has changed the look of that entire campus. We did HVAC, plumbing, electrical upgrades in basically every building that was built prior to 2000 in the district. You see some examples there, but really we touched most every building. We installed lighted turf fields at Century, Glencoe, and Hill High. As I mentioned, we replaced a bunch of portable classrooms. We're down to about 15 of the old portables, the old style portables in the district. Those were not identified as needing to be replaced, but I would think sometime in the future we'll probably want to do that. We replaced majority of those with modular buildings that are on a foundation that are at grade. You see some examples there, the Greenville Elementary cafeteria classroom addition. Blueberry Elementary School, they had 5 different portable classrooms around that campus that were all consolidated. In addition to just being a nicer facility, all of those buildings now have restrooms, so kids don't have to go out of the building to go use the restroom. So, another thing that we were hoping to be able to do was to replace the single pane windows around the district. We talked to Dave Peterson about this. We replaced all of those. We don't have any single pane windows in the district. You can see we got Farmington View, North Plains, Century, Delta Tech Stores, Groner, and West Union. Thank you. So good thing. We also wanted to be able to either replace or resurface all of the tennis courts in the district, which we were able to do. We also have a lot of pavement, sidewalks, and other what we call hardscapes in the district. And we had some of it that was in pretty bad shape. If you get back to the Hill High parking lot that was kind of falling apart. Well, it had fallen apart. So we were able to completely redo the parking lots at Hill High. As part of the parent drop off, we were able to do a lot of work at the free. We provided a new drive lane drop off area for Farmington View. Jeffrey Henry had those improvements. So again, that's going to be a never ending thing just because of the amount of asphalt and concrete that we have, but I think we've taken care of a big part of the part that we do for state. We also did a lot of work on ADA accessibility. All of our buildings are now accessible to the interior. We've also put in elevators at several buildings. We put in lifts to the stage at several buildings. So now, and a lot of ADA accessible restrooms. So we are going to be commissioning another ADA accessibility survey. We had one done back, I think it was 2012. And we use that as a basis for a lot of the work that we did this time. I need to update that and see where we stand now. Relieving crowded classrooms and planning for growth, we spent just under $200 million on this area. We built 8 new gyms at our elementary schools. So we no longer have any buildings where we share a gym and a cafeteria. And as we mentioned earlier, those are all built to that higher seismic standard. We expanded Glencoe a lot. This was another one of Matt's, I think, joys, was that we were able to replace the old library in Glencoe, build a brand new media center, so that we no longer have that in the middle and upstairs. At Glencoe, we also put in a new turf field, lots of CTE options for the students there. Again, just kind of and the new commons area. So kids don't have to go outside to get the cafeteria.
One of the real joys for me is early on in this process, we had some students who are long graduating, so they never saw any benefit from this, but softball team, girls from the softball team explaining what a problem it was that their field was just small, but they wanted to play games, and so games would be against their brain. And we were able to come in and put in turf fields for them, so that's no longer a problem. And the thing I love again about Glencoe, and I may have brought this up, I'm sure in other meetings, is that your library at Glencoe used to be way in, I called it the attic, it was way in the back, up on like the third floor. Now, I believe it's that building that's just right, isn't it? The top right. Yeah, the top right. Yeah, the top right. So it's right there as you're coming into the building. The library is one of the first things you see. And I think that really speaks a lot to the priorities of the district, that this place, we can call a media center, or what I would call a library, our seat of knowledge is right up front for our students to go to the school.
We expanded Evergreen Middle School, again, a new media center, 7 or 8 new classrooms. We were able to remodel the old media center into additional classrooms. We did a bunch of work in the commons there. We built in the pit. So it's really, and we put a lot of skylights in it. Just the building is just much brighter. I think the environment for students is just a whole lot.
That when you walk in, the office is on your right in front of you, it's the library. Then you go back in the classrooms. It's very bright. That was also something we did at Hill High. We had a lot of classrooms on natural light. We had skylights, we had a lot of natural light at Hill High classrooms.
Brookwood Elementary School, we took out the old Brookwood and we built a new Brookwood. This was the first of our prototype elementary school. We built the same building basically 3 times. Quality Ridge, new elementary school in North Plains. The same design, looks a little different finishes, but the same classroom concept, the same gym, cafeteria, giant hall, learning street, lots of light.
Some big features of this school was that we were able to recruit a Native American artist to do the murals on those pine walls. So a very special project.
Lots of features of record. Finally, Tamarack Elementary School just had a grand opening there in September in South Hillsboro. And again, just the same design, but a little bit different. This one focused on the life cycle of the Tamarack tree on those giant pillars there. I do point out that all of the 3 new elementary schools also have a synthetic turf lit field. So another amenity for the community.
One of the really amazing features of this elementary school, if you look at that picture, it's kind of in the center on the lower row. It's a think tank. It's a place where kids go and work on class projects together. And they have total quiet in there, but they also, you can see what's going on. You can see what the students are doing at all times. It's completely surrounded with us.
Yeah. Sonny just reminded me that one of the features of all of the lit fields, are the muscle lights that we installed that are really super directional. You don't get a lot of spillage out into the community, which is really important in an area like, Tamarack and South Hillsboro or Molly Ridgewood, basically right in the middle of it, but we'll do that. We built a new satellite transportation and support services campus. This was a satellite campus to the old transportation center on Walnut Street. Allows us to split our fleet up, be more efficient with our buses. Also allowed us to move a portion of our facilities maintenance crew out to this new facility. It will also be the home of our new mechanic program. Classrooms ready to go. We're outfitting the lab downstairs, the shop area. So one more opportunity.
And I think we'll probably have an old transportation center, everything I'm wrong to say. It really wasn't big enough to accommodate all of your transportation staff at the same time, was it?
No, the staff couldn't fit and we were out of spots for buses. So we really needed to keep up.
It's really just, it's a no-brainer because you've got like the main one over here on Walnut, but this one is completely on the opposite side of the district, really. So you got it.
Does the new facility have, charging stations where the electric bus that will be on its place?
It does not have the charging stations. It has all the infrastructure there for the charge.
I'll take infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that was a big push by one of our
Yes,
oversight
one of
committee
our
members.
oversight committee members used to be the sustainability officer, I think, for the city. He's now the city manager over in, Cornelius, North. Okay. So added scope, we wanted to be able to purchase some property. This district has always done a great job of maintaining an inventory of land so that when we see an opportunity or a need, we don't have to go out and buy the land after it's come into the urban growth boundary. It gets super expensive. So we were able to purchase 2 pieces of property. Actually, we sold 1 piece of property in South Hillsboro and used the proceeds to buy a bigger piece of property in South Hillsboro. But what we're showing here is a 20-acre site for a future middle school, elementary school site. Think South Meadows with Hazel. This is within the South Hillsboro, the Reach Crossing portion of South Hillsboro. Just a reminder, we also have a 10-acre elementary school site in the Butternut Creek portion of the South Hillsboro development. Then we have a 78-acre parcel now just across Rosedale Road outside of the Rosedale County for a future elementary school, high school site. So if and when we need it, we have property basically for a full feeder in that South Hillsboro area. Well, there it is. Okay. Providing modern education for every student. We spent just over $50 million on this. This includes our CTE upgrades and our classroom technology. So there are some of our students with our new Chromebook cards. We put the projectors, sound systems in every classroom. We have the new flexible classroom furniture. We replaced all of the furniture in the district, basically classroom furniture in the district. We have smart boards in every class. We have smart boards in the classroom. We were able to expand the career technical education spaces at all of our high school. There are some examples, not an exhaustive list, but the Century High School, we put in a new building for their early childhood program, culinary arts program, yeah, I think that's, yeah. Glencoe High School Health Sciences classroom, Glencoe High School construction trades, thank you. We've got some more examples here. The Hill High Auto Tech program, we added 4 bays to their program. The Liberty High School, solar array, and their sustainable agriculture building, that's kind of all on the same campus. The diesel mechanic space that will be coming to the transportation building, and then we built the new pathway center.
If you look at the Hillsboro High School Auto Tech, see that little line in the middle? That's where the wall was before. That wall got torn out, and that's how much the auto repair area got expanded. And then the Pathway Center, which is that building on the left, right? That was originally going to be a modular building. Yeah, modular. And we basically found out that it would be cheaper and better just to do it. Traditional stick construction, and that center has turned out, it's just beautiful. So I really encourage you to look at it. You know, the thing I really am proud of with the Hillsboro schools is that, you know, we have a graduation rate in our district that's roughly 5% higher than the state average. I think the secret to that is programs like this that look at those students that require a little bit more work to get them through the system. You know, they don't quite fit the traditional model sometimes, but we've got programs like this that go after that remaining percent to try to get them to graduate with the rest of their class. It's got showers, it's got washer dryers, all of these things for kids who maybe you're living out of a car. They've got a place they can go and use a really nice facility.
Thanks for that, man. You get me fired up over here.
No, yeah, that's something we do well.
Wise use of taxpayer dollars. We built a full-blown fiber optic ring in conjunction with the city of Hillsboro. About $18.5 million. So Jordan could go into a lot more detail, but basically we no longer pay Comcast for our fiber network. And it's redundant and it works all the time, and we can expand it and it won't cost us a whole lot more money. Yeah. All right. Yeah, that was great. Awesome. Awesome. So far, we have received $5 million-ish in energy incentives and through the energy trust funds. And all of that is coming back to the district. We had originally planned to use that to offset bond expenses. But I was asked or told by Superintendent Scott that this would be a better place for it. So, all of these funds are coming back to the district, along with all of the energy efficient equipment that we installed throughout the district. So I think we're going to see a big return on this investment over the next year. Okay, the 2017 bond project updates are now included in the latest drafts of the facilities assessment. This is the facilities assessment that we had done back in 2012 formed the basis for the work that the long range planning committee did that helped us develop the 2017 bond. We've now gone through and updated that facilities assessment and the facilities handbook to include all of the work that we've done with this 2017 bond, so that the next long-range planning committee can use that as the basis for their work moving forward. Another example of our wise use of the taxpayer dollars has been the Citizen Bond Oversight Committee that is met regularly for 3 or 4 times a year, plus doing field trips during the summer to help provide guidance, monitoring, reporting, basically to ensure that we're doing what we said we were going to do. We also decided, I think in the second year of the bond, that in addition to our regular financial audit that would include the bond, we were going to have a separate audit done just of the bond books. And basically what we asked them is to ensure that we were spending the money appropriately, that what we said we were going to do in our bond promise and our IRS filings were being met. So that we can go back to our community and say, we are doing the right thing with your dollars. I think we mentioned that we wanted to be able to spend 90% of our dollars that we collected on the stuff that needed to be done. We actually spent about 96% of those dollars. 3.4% went to the district staff, our project management costs, and all of those other miscellaneous overhead costs. So I'm really proud of that. So 96.6% of the bond was spent directly on projects, way more than what we promised. We also promised that we would keep our tax rate below the 224 per thousand that we had at the time. We passed the bond. The new statements are coming out right now, and we are at $1.97. So, on promise, check. 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 Okay. Okay.
So may I ask how this is incredible? It's gotta make you feel good.
Does, yeah.
It just in every way makes you feel good. My question is probably to that. I know this stuff is on a website, but how did we communicate with the very people who blessed us with the money and the vote to tell them how good we did?
Jane, you wanna?
I'm not invited.
Oh, she wants to know how we communicated all of our stewardship. Do you want to talk about the pages that you do twice a year for us?
Yeah, so as part of, the Look Inside newsletter that goes to every household in the district, there's a bond section, typically 5 or 6 pages. And I produce highlights of the 6 months before. So we'll talk about the current projects, what's been done, what's coming up. And I've highlighted our energy efficiency projects, all the security measures that we put in place. So just a lot of different topics, and they're all recorded. And the Look Inside, plus the weekly hot news. So featuring a particular project every week. They're kind of tapered off now, but yeah, basically, hey, here's something that's been going on, you might be interested in it.
But for the past 5 years, every single week, we had a bond update article in Hot News, in addition to the multi-page spread that got mailed directly to the households of the taxpayers. So we really felt like that was a good way to have historical record of all of the accountability measures that we've implemented.
And then regular updates on the bond website, and then the respective schools for whatever projects were going on. So I'll put it on the bond website, as well as the particular school for whatever was going on. So there'd always be some photo and then a little nice article on it.
one thing that was really what I do as part of my job as chairman of the bond committees, I was wanting to make sure that we spent equitable amounts across the district. Were there any schools that we shortchanged? Were there any schools where we spent, schools in nicer neighborhoods where we spent more money than we spent money on schools in lower income neighborhoods? And with that bond website, I was able to go through and I could look school by school. What are we spending? What are we doing? Is it equitable? And it was, because I had all that information right at my fingertips. I could pick it apart. I could lose myself for days. Pictures of things, videos, drone videos flying over school sites. I mean, it took all of the hard work out of my job. It really did.
Advance 2 more slides.
Yes, we have some slides.
Yeah.
Bond promise. Okay, so we have a very detailed report coming out that will highlight all of the work we did at every building. And that will be coming out in December. We'll post it on the website. We'll post it probably on the district website. We'll make sure that all of you guys get a copy of it there.
And there will be a hot news article.
We're happy to answer any questions, comments.
I just want to say that the biggest, I think, impact for a lot of, speaking to the owl, the biggest impact that I saw as a parent was the drop off separation. It was such a huge traffic congestion issue for so many schools. That was a huge, really, I mean, especially coming back from the pandemic. That was very noticeable.
I did want to point out that we were able to, thanks to Jemai, your certificate.
Travis stole that.
I stole it back.
Okay.
We did on behalf of the board and the staff here at the district, we made some certificates for you all for your leadership. It means a lot to us, not only for accountability and for making sure, helping us get through the process and communicate clearly with our community. You all have friends and neighbors in the community, and your advocacy and the way that you represent the work of our district means a lot to our community. So thank you for your hours of service and the citizens of the so. Matt, your enthusiasm for this project is infectious. We'll miss your presentations. We hope that you'll participate the next time.
He was on the 2008 or 6.
We're starting up a long range planning committee again, man.
Can we have you guys stand up with your certificates so that we can say thank you?
Get a picture. I also wanted to say that Jane. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You will need to go out for a bond exam, your stewardship of our resources and the way that you put together visuals and all the stuff that you've done, and makes it so that our community trusts us. So we'll make it easier the next time around. So thank you very much.
Our ribbon cuttings were amazing.
Do you guys, Kara, can you put up the cover slide so we could have something as a backdrop to take a photo? There's nothing really pretty in this room.
Then you guys come in here up there and I'll go to the middle and I'll take your shot there.
Jane is out. Should I get out of this? You're not getting out of this.
Although the light in the faces might not be the best. Maybe over here instead. The light in the faces is real bad. Sorry. But there's a plant over there, so that's not horrible. All right. Let me switch that chairs. Slide it out. But- All right. Okay, awesome. All right, you guys are wonderful. Say. Awesome, thank you so much.
Matt, did you know you were signing up for 7 years or so of work? Any other questions or comments for the evening?
Great job, thank you.
There's just, I mean, so many things I'm so proud of, so yeah, like the parent drop off pickup, yeah.
This might be Adam's last board meeting, and he's invited to come back every time that he wants. So, Adam,
Just
thank
don't give public comment, okay? No.
Maybe we were just gonna have to have in-person only.
Yeah.
Travis, is it okay for us to add something? Just-
Yeah, feel free, yes, please.
I just want to say, we're so grateful for Adam, for Jane, for Sharon, for all the on-site contractors who were there to help us. That's what I forgot to mention. That's part of the team. Like, all of the contractors, project managers. We went through some, pandemic, and we came out of it, on budget, on time, and that doesn't happen without really good people doing the work, so.
Thank you. And calling people out too, Eric and I were fairly new to our board service and tried to do as much as we could to help convince the community that it was a good idea, but really, Deanna Palm, Jerry Willie, and Kim Strelchin, former board member, like they played a huge role in convincing the community that this was a wise investment, that, we learned at that point that 70% of the voters in our district do not have kids in schools, and yet we still 2-to-1 ratio because they realize how important it is for the kids to have a quality education and improve property value, and so like just shout out to them too for leading such a tremendous campaign to get it passed in the first place.
A lot of knocking on doors.
Yeah.
That's not over yet.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks for coming.
I feel like this switching around the order dovetails quite nicely. Pretty good, all right. So as we sort of met, like, Nancy mentioned living in several other states. I went to K-12 in a different state. I spent a lot of time in 3 other states, all over the country. Everybody does it differently. And I think it was running for the board position and campaigning for the 2017 bond, where I learned so much about how Oregon does things differently than other places that I had lived. Difference between a levy and a bond and what the dollars can be used for and all that kind of stuff. And we realized that without having that on a ballot or something coming up or whatever, that maybe the board members don't have that lens or that ability to understand what those differences are. So we cooked up a little class session, and Michelle's going to lead us in sort of helping us understand what the differences are, how the money can be spent. Mostly bonds spent on things, levies on people, right? Roughly. So the next agenda item is Michelle dovetailing nicely with our bond presentation about how these kinds of things are able to be used legally in our communities.
Thank you, Mark. Just to add a tail onto the bond presentation, as a financial officer for the district, you simply can't do better than having someone like Adam Stewart overseeing a bond project. It was phenomenal to watch him move $500 million towards this kind of, like, great stewardship and mentorship to me, and I'm just expressing some gratitude for that. Adam has also taught me a lot about property taxes and how they work, alongside my own experience and research. So, again, just huge gratitude to him. So yeah, this is, we can go ahead. Oh, I can do it. I think that's power. Thank you, Kara. So I am gonna talk kind of quickly because I want to leave room for questions for anyone who has them. And of course, you guys can follow up with me later. But we're not gonna rush to the end of this 3-part series. So in a couple months, we're gonna come back with recommendations and timelines based on a bunch of information that we've compiled and shared with you and gotten responses on. So tonight, we're really just gonna focus in on tax levy history in Oregon and the different types that we can access as an K-12. Okay. So learner will be able to, that's like the acronym I got from my instructional friends, and they're trying to help me use this more in my presentation. So as learners, hopefully you guys will be able to, at a high level, know property tax history, understand the relationship between property tax revenue and the state school fund, which is our operating fund. And then I'm going to share with you the different types that we can explore and the differences between those two types. So that's really what we're going to focus on here tonight. Next time we will get more into our current situation with our debt schedules and like timelines and looking ahead. But right now, this is what we're going to focus on. All right, local property taxes. So there's really 3 distinct property tax eras in Oregon. There were everything before 1991 and 92. And a tax expert or a policy wonk or someone like that may have way more detailed information than I do about this. But I thought that this would be an appropriate level to share tonight and get any questions you might have. So before 91, it was purely levy based. So every taxing jurisdiction in an area, whatever area they serve, their operations were based on a local tax. So that's quite different than we have today, as you see. The taxing district rates were combined so that, and structurally created some inequities in the state, and we addressed those later on. There was no real market value versus assessed value. Assessed value wasn't a thing at that time. It was just real market value that taxes were paid on. And then the increase was limited to 6%, which is different from today as well. So Measure 5 in 1990-91 introduced limits of $5 for schools for education and $10 combined for other government for each individual property. It was a hybrid levy and rate-based system. And the reduction in taxes was due because of limits is known as compression. So it was a way of kind of smoothing out some of those spikes in the area. And so Measure 50 came in 97 and it repealed Measure 47, which I didn't even put up here, but there was quite a pendulum swing in both tax collections and governments being able to provide services. So the purpose of Measure 50 was to reduce taxes in 97-98 year and control future growth. And so that's where the assessed value came in and separated from the real market value in terms of what taxes were to be paid on a property. It also switched to permanent tax rates. And see here, our permanent tax rate is $4.97. Oh, Beth's got it memorized.
No, not really. Just it's a lot of decimals.
It's a lot. It's all, it was 2.4, but it's a permanent rate, and that's something that we assess every year as part of our budget setting. It's a technicality because it doesn't ever change. It's our permanent rate to support operations.
Just probably mostly for the benefit of our students. They might not, hi guys, they might not understand when you say like $5 and $10 that is per $1,000 of a home's value. So it's not just $5 or $10 that you multiply that by every 1,000 of home's value.
Yeah, the other clarification is this tax is assessed to the property owner. So a renter wouldn't necessarily pay this tax, although they might see an increase in their rent. This is specifically taxing on property owners. So all of the taxes throughout, there are some tax programs to provide relief for property tax payers. There are some exemptions and deferrals. People have to be eligible either under certain circumstances or the property itself has to be eligible. For example, farm deferral, agricultural use, forest, etc. The difference, I think, between exemption and deferral is exemption is you don't pay the tax and it's like dependent upon the person, whereas a deferral is something that's delayed. Because if you chop down all the trees on a property in forest deferral and you don't replant it, it will come out of deferral and you will owe all the back taxes from the time it went into deferral. Be very expensive. So there's a lot of incentive there to keep a property in its current use. There are some valuation and reassessment options for property tax payers. Like if you think, hey, mine is too high, or I put a different house on there that's worth less value, you have the opportunity to approach your county tax assessor or the state to see if you can get a valuation change or a reassessment done. And then there's also renewal and enhancement zones. And those are areas that we're trying to incentivize growth, whether it's industrial or business or whatever. So it creates kind of a cap in the amount of property taxes that the developers will pay until a certain period of time comes to. All right, and so this is kind of, there's a lot of misconceptions about local property taxes and it's all going to Hillsboro, right? So in Oregon, with the equalization distribution formula, the state school fund grant, which is made up of mostly income tax revenue, is kind of coupled with the local revenue we receive from property taxes, and we get a per student distribution total. So our operating budget is based on the number of students we have and the types of students we have, and not how much local property tax we receive. For example, the more local property taxes we receive, the less state school fund grant we get. So it's really student dependent.
And that's, so anybody said, you want us to wait for questions or?
You're welcome.
If anybody's had a conversation with me about this, I'm assuming this is where you hear me say, this is why Washington County is a net exporter of education dollars. So, want to make sure that that's very clear. So, and this is one of the things that changed when Michelle was pointing out those different measures. It used to be property taxes paid in Washington County, stayed in Washington County to fund education, which meant, you know, as Washington County is one of the economic engines of the state, that per student spending here was probably higher than maybe in Baker or Wallowa County or whatever. So a county that may not have had a robust property tax base before these changes would not have had the same per student dollar allocation as we had here in Washington County. So since all of these measures have been enacted, we pay all of our money to the state. They figure out how they're going to divvy it up equally per student and then send it back to us. And as a result of Washington County being one of the economic engines of the state, we pay more to that fund than we get back as taxpayers in Washington. Is that about right?
That is about right. I think there are one or two districts in Oregon that don't get any state school fund. Like, I don't know, Jewel or something.
Yeah,
because they
Seaside
receive
used to
so
be one
much
of them.
local revenue that they don't, you know, for a small school, that they don't receive any state school fund. So it's definitely a mix across the state with the idea that the amount of support students will receive is standardized, right? Regardless of where they live. Thank you, Mark. All right, so looking at the supplemental levy types, the capital project or bond levy, that's what Adam was all about earlier. That we asked the voters to approve $408 million, and we, had such a high premium. We had almost a 20% premium on those dollars. We ended up spending over $500 million. So yay, again, they got me all excited when they were talking. But the capital project or bond levy requires a voter authorization, more than 50% turnout if it's not a general election. So I know we always kind of target the general elections for that. The levy that we assess to the public is determined by the debt service schedule that we pay for the bonds. So the way that works is we get voter authorization, we go out and sell bonds. This last time we sold them in 2 series, but that creates a whole bunch of cash for us to do these giant projects that we normally wouldn't be able to do. And then over time, we have to pay that principal and interest back on that loan. Basically, it's a loan. And that's what we pass on to the taxpayers. That's what was authorized for us to do. Typically in Hillsboro, they've been 15 to 20 years in length. And if the conditions are right, we will refinance it if we think we can save it or we need to restructure our debt. So it's excluded in the state school fund formula. So it's all separate. It doesn't mean we get less state school fund if we pass it on, which is great. It can only be spent on the ballot item titles, not used for operations, and that can be really confusing if we have to reduce our operational budget while we're spending millions of dollars on new things. That can be very confusing to communicate to the community at large. And then you heard all about the renewal portion where we didn't increase our tax rate per thousand. And our last bond, and I think historically those are the easiest to get a yes vote for because they aren't as challenging. Also, the measure 5 tax limits do not apply. Thank you. I was pretty sure I was getting around. Thank you, Monica. I appreciate it.
And I would just add there too, then, this is also different in the way Oregon works in other places, right? So in some other states, the state figures out when you need a new school in this area and they allocate money for a new school in that area. We are very fortunate that our voters in 2017 realized Hillsboro was growing, that we needed more schools, that we had many schools that were in disrepair and needed a lot of renovations, and they passed the bond. That is how we could spend our general education dollars on double pane windows in all of our elementary schools, but it would mean that's money we can't spend on teachers. So traditionally what Oregonians do is pass a bond in their community to do maintenance, construction, big projects. That's how it generally works. Not every state's that way. That's how we are. And we are very fortunate that everybody, that 2-1, Hillsboro school district voters said yes. There are many school districts in Oregon that have difficulty passing a bond or just find it impossible to pass a bond. And as their buildings fall into disrepair and maybe their economic base doesn't feel like they can take on any more tax responsibilities, there's not really many mechanisms for those school districts to repair those buildings.
Thank you. Okay, the other supplemental levy that we can assess is the school district is the local option levy, and it's come up lots of different times over the years. And I think it's going to be a discussion that the board has again. And this levy can be assessed for operations. It can be assessed for certain technology needs. It can be assessed for anything. It's really, we are targeting a certain amount to be raised. So we're not going to take out a loan. We're just going to watch that tax revenue come in every year and use it on whatever we ask the voters to approve for us. So Hillsboro has not had a local option levy yet. Same voter authorization requirements. And it was created by Measure 50. So it wasn't even an option, a local option for school districts until 2000, 2001. And not all school districts have them. The Measure 5 tax limits, that $5 for education, do apply here. And what that does is creates a real challenge for us to determine property by property what that tax is going to be. So it's kind of more difficult to communicate if you hadn't had one before. exactly what it's gonna cost your taxpayers, and they like to know that when they're making a vote. So it could be very different between neighbors and, whether they're residents that are property owners or business owners. And would be levied by a total dollar amount, like a targeted dollar amount to raise, or $1 per thousand, which would be a rate. It's the revenue, thankfully, is outside of the state school fund distribution, so even though you could use it for operations, it would reduce our state school fund grant, and so that's what makes this attractive, in terms of using for operations. Again, the items must be authorized under the ballot title. We can't spend it on something we didn't say we were gonna do. And they're typically 3 to 5 years in length.
Many districts around us have implemented local option, Beaverton and Forest Grove. Beth, or you know any of other neighbors that have it?
They're in part 2. That's part 2 of.
Oh.
Now you're jumping ahead.
Look at that segment.
So, our next part is gonna be the local option capital project levy outlook specifically for HSD. So we're gonna look at our debt service schedule, the timing of things. I've invited, Lauren McMillan from Piper Sandler, our, bond counsel, to talk to us about, what some options are looking forward and just answer any questions that you have that I might not be able to answer on the spot. And then part 3, again, will just be some recommendations and timelines based on what we hear from our final assessment of our property. We'll look at student enrollment and then come forward with some options maybe based on where board interests lie.
I was just gonna say, especially for.
Way over here.
I'll just walk over here. I was gonna add that, part of it being successful that we passed bonds or, levies if we choose to do so, is that the community has trust in our ability to be responsible and to good governance as a board. And that's why it's so important to have a really highly functional and effective board. You see a lot of times happening, especially right now, there's a lot of boards that are in disarray. They're fighting out in the media, they're fighting in and it's really, bad for our community, for our students, that same body isn't gonna ask people for money. You think they're gonna trust them if they see them behave like that? So it's also one of those really important things that us having a good board and, like our working agreements, how we work well together is something that is reflected by our ability to pass bonds. And there's a lot of districts that aren't able to do that, and that is a component of it as well.
Oh, you are fighting, Brad. Just kidding, it's a joke. It's a joke.
You guys think of questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Superintendent Ryman.
I was giggling.
Okay.
To the point of the previous, so that, what's getting at in the way it's sort of been summarized to me again, bonds are spent on things, buildings, roofs, air conditioners, windows. Levies are spent mostly on people. And so, we typically haven't had one, but it's a way, in my mind, for a community to sort of say that the state is not providing us enough. We think our students deserve more, and we could reduce class size by X or whatever if taxpayers decided to invest in our community. That's sort of how almost always a levy is used for people. Most income. So that's the main difference. Other questions?
So I take it that after a successful 2017 capital bond project, and we should be proud that now maybe it's time to start focusing in on getting our teachers some help and then additionally putting some positive impact on our children. Which then leads us to a potential local option levy. And I hope that we are beginning to entertain that because we have got to invest in our teachers.
You and I are both looking ahead to the next one. That's
Part three.
this one,
I'm sorry.
this one doesn't.
I'm excited
The
too.
2017 bond doesn't come off of taxpayer rolls for quite a while, right? Like it's just because we're done with construction.
Yes, I
So
understand.
what's the timeline on that? 2017?
We'll look at the debt service next time,
Okay.
but yeah,
Alright.
there is a step that comes down after 2017.
But we do have one that's coming off sometime soon. That's what we're gonna discuss.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, in part 3, we talked about needing to inform ourselves about the details, the history here, the different mechanisms, and we're doing it neutrally without selling one package. There's a line of thinking that we have projects upcoming in the next decade that would warrant going out for a bond renewal. We have class sizes that would warrant an examination of a local option levy. And then we have the possibility of a hybrid approach, which we don't have a recommendation. So the idea of a 3-part series would be to provide information, then get down to a local context, and then part 3 might be that kind of conversation. So I want the board to know that our purpose here is education and not, we're not trying to lead you to a conclusion that's already formed.
So as that Travis, Rose and I discussed the agendas for meetings, the idea of taking up our time in work sessions with these was to create a bunch of information and give people opportunities to ask questions. I'm not advocating for one thing or advocating for a different thing. I just realized at some point, like, because of Eric and I were here in 2017, we may have had information that wasn't shared by everybody in the room. We wanted to try to find a way to share that information before. So if we do decide to talk about options, we all are coming from a solid knowledge base. Yeah. So hopefully y'all find this a productive use of your time and we will do it 2 other ones. So.
Apologies for being over.
I got ahead too.
It's all good. It's all good. Thank you. And send questions if you think of some later. I didn't see anybody online.
Yeah, I was looking for hands in. Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. I think that's it, right? Yeah, board discussion time. RJ, want to start?
Just wanted to say thank you, Michelle, for. I haven't even heard this yet. I haven't even, before looking it up right now, I haven't even heard what levy is. So I just say thank you for teaching me a little bit. Again, with the bond, I didn't say anything to them, but what they did was just incredible. I mean, I see it every single day when I go to Glencoe, or sometimes when I go to North Plains or at Baldy Ridge. It's insane what they did there. I'm just shocked by just seeing. It wasn't just my school, obviously. I can't see every single other school that got affected by this bond, but it was just amazing. A couple of things to say about me. My theater teacher told me to say this to you guys. Come watch the fall play. 1 second. Come watch the fall play October 20th, 21st, 26th, 27th, 28th at 7:30. I love a little kid. It's a love story between these guy and girl. The guy's a little bit of a dude. But it's fun. If you guys are free, come watch it. And also, I mentioned last meeting that I got accepted as a finalist for a scholarship called Beat the Odds, a $16,000 scholarship that Brooke told me about. So they called me today, and her name is Janine. She told me that she had good news and bad news for me. The bad news was that I didn't get accepted for Beat the Odds. The good news is that the parent organization, Renaissance, they offered me a scholarship for $20,000.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for it, and I was kind of really surprised about the whole bond thing. And I feel like it's really underrepresented within our society, because it's kind of like the backbone of our culture. It's only noticed when you're physically there, and you don't notice until you really have it or don't have it. My brother is a prime example of when he went to Hill High, he had nothing, as I told Francisca, that he saw it at Hill High as kind of like assumed, because food would come out like things that are really disgusting. And everything was just not how it was. So I kind of formed a stigma of being ghetto. And that led me to my question of, now that the bond are figured out physically of that it isn't ghetto anymore, how are we as a school board, or how is Hill High going to encourage the fact that the school is not like what it is, it's not ghetto? And how we are able to kind of confront that, especially because with the incoming freshmen, there's sort of a division between those that believe that, oh, I thought it was going to be ghetto, but it really isn't. And there's still those that have a fixed mindset on, oh, it's this and that, and they all always see the negatives about it. So I have a question for all of us, is how we're going to encourage the fact that not only for Hill High, but many other schools that were renovated, that were a part of the older schools from our district, how are we going to encourage the fact that it isn't what it used to be? And I just want to like thank everyone for being here. I didn't get a scholarship.
No, not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah.
That's
Travis, anything you want to add tonight?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Congratulations. Last week, we got a chance to go to the OSBA legislative event with a group, and I just wanted to appreciate our student reps for showing up in the evening to learn about legislative process and help us set priorities. And then Yvette and Mark and Erica were there. I was telling Erica, I haven't gotten a chance to see Erica in her sort of state leadership role. And it was really cool to see how influential you are and how well respected you are by your colleagues. And I didn't realize you were a founding member of the Color Caucus for OSBA, and it was cool to see you in that venue. And in particular, Mark, I was impressed by your advocacy for HSD and our needs in that forum. So thank you for your strong leadership in that venue as well. The pre-K admin meeting happened today. We have 80 administrators downstairs, and everybody breaks out. I mean, we cover 15 topics, but one of the things that we did today was have a data summit like event. Did we call it a data summit? Right. Everybody's looking at student data down to the school level, attached to goals that they've set in their school improvement plans, which attach to our strategic plan goals. And it was one of the first times that I've seen our new strategic plan in action at the leadership level that will make an impact in every classroom in our school district. And you don't get to see that, but that's what's happening today, and gave us a lot of energy as leaders this morning. And then a little thing, I went to a Hill High volleyball game. I'm making a personal effort to get to more sporting events. I'm not the sportiest guy.
Really?
But I went to, right, it was you'd assume otherwise, right?
Yeah, I wasn't intimidated. No, I heard about it.
Oh, no. I went there in my costume as a dad with my daughter, and I was impressed by the statement of sportsmanship. The announcer announces a statement about sportsmanship and an inclusive environment at our sporting events that got applause from the crowd and the athletes. And I was really proud. You might hear rumblings around the state at conflicts that are happening or issues that are happening at sporting events. And they didn't happen at that sporting event. And I think that's because of our proactive stance on being an inclusive school district and having sporting events that are fun and positive for our community. So as a community member and as a superintendent, I was proud of our atmosphere at Hill High. So that's all. Thank you.
I just want to add one more thing I completely forgot. I apologize for interrupting. In the theme of RJ, My choir concert is next Tuesday, so I'm inviting all of you to come. And you best believe that to make sure you guys don't forget, I'm gonna email each and every one of you. It's at our auditorium at 7 p.m. and you're gonna see me twice, actually. Guys, that's a lot, huh? But you're gonna get to see also our community choir perform, which is made up of alumni from choir and parents of kids and more, along with me twice. Thank you.
Board directors, we'll start online. Oh, I see we have a guest. Sheehan, do you have anything you want to add tonight? Or does Laura have anything she wants to add tonight?
Laura has been talking over me. No, I have nothing to add tonight, but it's sad I can't be in the room with you all, but good to see you all on the screen. And Laura will make a little appearance. She's getting ready for bath time, so.
Patrick, anything to add tonight? Patrick, do you have anything you want to add tonight?
Oh, thanks, Mark. Not too much. I really appreciate all the informational presentations tonight. I've always been interested since I joined the board in why we don't have a local option levy. So I'll be looking forward to hearing part 3 of this series, but really good information. And just lots of exciting stuff going on in schools. I've been trying to get out to as many athletic events as I can, but not as many as I'd like to because I've been traveling, but hoping to do more as the year gets on. And I just feel a sense of good spirit. All the students and parents I talk to are excited for all the things happening this autumn and the school plays that are coming up. A lot of really exciting ones that sound interesting. So thanks to everyone for all the good work.
You, what are you getting into tonight?
Yeah, I echo what Patrick said about presentations, appreciate the presentations. Again, RJ, congratulations on that scholarship. I'll save you an email, because I will be out of town, so I will miss your choir concert.
All FaceTime you, sir.
And that's all I have. Everything.
I'd just say thank you to all of you that came last Tuesday, to the Tuesday evening. It was great to have you all learn more about our advocacy efforts and have our student reps there. It's really awesome because no other district had them. So I really appreciate us just continuing to participate and bring our issues to the table. What else did I have? I was actually thinking that maybe just on behalf of the board, I don't know if we could send like a letter to the editor or something, just to thank our board, our bond committee, like name them. And just like say, and then also put in the website, so anybody wants to look at it, but just say thank you to the community as well for like voting and passing the bond. We could do that on behalf of the board, but that is a thought or idea. And I like the way that we're doing the bond presentations too, like a mini series. So. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I guess I wrote typing, so. Anything you want to add tonight?
Good news, bad news. The bad news is a confession. I just wanted to share it with the board. I felt horrible. I missed the deadline for the submission of my application for the OSB board. And thanks to some additional support from some really critical people, Rose and Mark, and Erica's text, we were able to go back to OSBA, find out that there is a second option if you happen to miss that deadline for whatever reason. And we will be pursuing that option. So we will probably have to come back to you in November for a decision about an appointment. I feel very bad about that. That is not how I do business, but life has been very busy for me lately. So I do humbly apologize, but the good news is that I will be able to step into that role, and that will happen in November. Congratulations on that scholarship. Knock it out. So proud of you. And today, not just every day, but today is one of those days where you just want to say proud to be HSC. Because this is awesome. But
That you wanted to say?
Yeah, of course, thank you all for all of your work, and Michelle, I'm very proud of this, slide presentation you made for us, because I'm really excited to learn more about levies and bonds, and I'm excited, like everybody else, for their option. My brain is now turning its wheels, so I'm really excited.
Great. Yes, thanks for all the information today. It's kind of a lot, but you know, it's and I would say one of the great places to learn more about this kind of stuff is at the OSBA convention, which is coming up in a minute. So there's breakout sessions about tax levies, there's breakout sessions about PERS, like the PERS 101 session I've seen twice. I think if it's available, I might go again. Michelle presents at it sometimes. Feel like they're so dense there that every time I see it, I learn something new. Well, I'd love to see a PERS 202. Because there's more to go. So just advocating for attending the OSBA convention one more time. As students, it should be on a day that you have off. So if you want to attend, let Rose know, and we'll try to find a way to facilitate you ride down with one of us. But I think I have a lot of sheets you can ride in our car or something like that. Thanks for the reminder about the play, and thanks to Beth for putting all of the plays in hot news. The process of negotiation in our household of when we can go to which one has already begun. So thanks for putting that in hot news yesterday, and I look forward to seeing as many plays and athletic events as I can. And I feel like that's about it. Yeah. All right, thanks everybody. We are adjourned.